The starlint's horizon descended like a silver arrow through the thin clouds of Thalira Roman 4. From the ship's windows, the planet seemed both alive and dead at once. Vast forests shimmered like emerald oceans, their leaves reflecting the pale sunlight. Yet something about the view unsettled everyone on board. There were no signs of life beyond the trees, no towns, no roads, not even the smoke of a distant fire. Still, the land below bore patterns that could not have been shaped by nature. Lines stretched for hundreds of miles, sharp and straight, converging in circles so perfect that even the ship's sensors hesitated to categorize them as natural. Commander Thalen Vieira tightened his grip on the controls, his voice quiet. "This planet feels watched," he said, "as if it remembers something we don't." No one answered him. Words felt wrong in this silence, like breaking a sacred rule. Dr. Serenia Calith, standing just behind him, watched the world below with unblinking eyes. Her thoughts swirled with questions. Who had made those marks? Why had they been left behind? But deeper than curiosity was a feeling she could not name. It was as though the planet itself waited for their arrival. The ship touched down in a clearing that seemed too convenient to be natural. The grass here was shorter, pressed down as if countless feet had once stood on this very ground. Towering above the clearing were structures unlike anything they had seen before, spires of silver metal that rose like frozen lightning bolts. Their surfaces were flawless, reflecting distorted images of the researchers as they stepped onto the alien soil. Professor Kalen Drix knelt beside the nearest spire, brushing away layers of moss and dirt. Beneath the decay, the metal shone as though freshly forged. "This alloy," he whispered, pressing his gloved hand against it. "It's repairing itself. It refuses to die." His voice carried both awe and unease, for a material that could mend itself after ages hinted at creators far beyond their understanding. "Over here," called Dr. Aravind Solin. She stood near a strange archway half buried between the roots of two colossal spires. A faint, translucent barrier sealed the entrance, glowing with soft blue light. Around its frame ran a series of angular symbols, sharp yet elegant, like rivers of frozen lightning carved into the metal. Serenia approached slowly. Her fingers traced the alien runes, feeling a subtle vibration beneath her touch. A quiet hum came from her wrist translator, struggling to find meaning in the language. Then the words appeared on her display, stark and chilling in their simplicity. "Vault of the third cycle, access reserved for heirs ascendant." For a long moment no one spoke. The phrase carried a strange weight, as though it had waited for them across endless ages. Heirs ascendant. The words implied design, intent, a message meant not for anyone but for them. Before anyone could react, the barrier flickered. The runes along the frame pulsed with light and the door parted silently. A stale breath of air, heavy with dust and forgotten centuries, brushed past them. Dim lights flickered on in sequence, casting a ghostly glow along a corridor that sloped downward into darkness. Professor Drix stepped back in alarm. "It opened on its own. We didn't touch anything." Serenia's gaze remained fixed on the now open passage. "It knew we were here," she said softly, her voice trembling with something between fear and wonder. "It was waiting for us." They hesitated at the threshold, staring into the unknown. It was more than a physical entrance. It felt like a door to history itself, to truths buried so deeply that time had almost erased them. In that silence, Serenia felt the enormity of their presence. Every step forward would not just be exploration. It would be acceptance of a destiny someone else had written long before their species existed. As they crossed the threshold, faint vibrations pulsed through the ground, rhythmic and steady, like the heartbeat of a colossal being awakening from an eternal sleep. The air inside was cool and dry, carrying a metallic scent that clung to the back of their throats. The walls gleamed faintly, etched with more symbols that glowed as they passed, as if recognizing them. No one dared to speak. Each footstep echoed down the long corridor, amplifying the feeling that they were intruders in a place that did not belong to them. The silence was not empty, it was expectant, heavy with the presence of something vast and unseen. Serenia slowed, her hand brushing the wall. "This place isn't just a ruin," she whispered. "It's alive. It remembers." In that moment, she understood the quiet lesson the planet was teaching them. Civilizations believed themselves eternal, yet they vanished, leaving behind silent monuments that outlived their creators. History was not simply the story of progress. It was the story of memory, of lessons unheeded, of choices that shaped futures long after those who made them were gone. She felt a chill, not from fear, but from humility. Whatever they would find in this vault would challenge the very idea of free will and destiny. And as the corridor opened into a vast chamber ahead, glowing with crystalline spires, she realized that they were no longer just explorers. They were trespassers in the legacy of beings who might have once played gods. Deep inside, they would uncover the truth of those who had built this place, the Oravans. The corridor widened into a circular chamber so vast that the ceiling vanished into shadows. Along the walls stood crystalline spires, tall and slender, each one humming softly with an energy that felt more alive than mechanical. Their surfaces shimmered like frozen starlight, and faint streams of light pulsed within them, as if thoughts flowed through their cores. "Doctor," Serenia Calith stepped closer, her footsteps echoing across the smooth metallic floor. She reached out a cautious hand toward the nearest crystal. The moment her fingers hovered inches away, the spire brightened, and a cascade of holographic images burst into the air. Figures walking upright, tall and graceful, their skin pale as moonlight and their eyes deep pools of silver. They were nothing like any species she knew, and yet there was something hauntingly familiar about them, as if the galaxy carried their memory in its blood. "These must be the Oravans," whispered Dr. Aravind Solon, her voice filled with awe. "The ones who built this place." More images appeared, cities suspended above oceans, starships the size of continents, weapons that bent matter and light to their will. The Oravans were not just explorers. They were masters of creation, reshaping reality with technology so advanced that it blurred the line between science and divinity. They had achieved what most civilizations could only dream of, power so great that nothing in their time could challenge them. Professor Kalen Drix's hands trembled as he scanned the glowing symbols that danced across the air. "These aren't just records," he murmured. "They're instructions, journals. Look at this line, observation phase 7 complete, subject species developing as predicted." Commander Thalen Veyra's brows furrowed. "Subject species, are they talking about us?" The chamber shifted, more crystals flaring to life, projecting new scenes, different worlds, different species at their earliest stages of development. Primitive societies receiving sudden bursts of knowledge, mathematics carved into stone tablets, new tools appearing in the hands of hunters, dreams whispered to sleeping philosophers. They weren't just watching, Serenia said, her voice heavy. They were guiding, changing us. Prof. Drix's translator finished decoding another passage, and his face went pale. Not just guidance, genetic alterations. They modified DNA, introduced mutations to make us smarter, more cooperative, more adaptable. Every major leap our species made. He looked around at the team, his voice faltering. It wasn't natural. Silence fell over the chamber. The reality was too vast, too heavy. Everything they had believed about history, about free will, had just been shattered. Thalen clenched his fists. So every war we fought, every alliance we formed, every invention we thought was ours was part of their plan. The crystals pulsed brighter, revealing even more disturbing truths. Wars once thought random were now shown as deliberate events, orchestrated to push civilizations toward unity without dominance. Alliances that seemed born of chance had been calculated steps in a pattern stretching across millennia. Dr. Solon stepped closer to the images of the Oravans. Their silver eyes seemed to look right through her, calm and knowing, as if even now they were watching. "Why would they do this?" she asked softly. "Why shape entire civilizations like clay? What were they preparing us for?" As if answering her question, a final hologram appeared, a galaxy map littered with red markers, worlds that glowed briefly before fading to black. Above the map, words formed in the Oravan's language, stark and final. Phase 8 begins soon. The heir's ascendant must be ready. A cold shiver ran down Serenia's spine. She realized that they were not just standing in a vault of history. They were standing inside a plan older than their civilizations, older than their understanding of freedom itself. And the ones who had shaped them had done so not out of malice but out of necessity. The chamber hummed softly, as if waiting for their next step. The Oravan legacy was not just knowledge, it was a burden, and now it belonged to them. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that history itself had not unfolded naturally. The air in the chamber felt heavier as more of the crystalline spires awakened, each pulsing with streams of light that seemed to carry thoughts rather than power. New holograms flickered into being, scenes from countless worlds scattered across the stars. Primitive species huddled around fires, carving symbols into stone. Sailors charted the skies with constellations they had never seen before. Entire civilizations rose in sudden bursts of progress, their advances far too rapid to be natural. Professor Kalen Drix's voice trembled as he translated another Oravan record. Phase 9 projections confirmed. Cognitive shaping through dream guidance successful in 37 species. He swallowed hard. They planted ideas directly into the minds of our ancestors. Every great leap we thought was born of inspiration. Mathematics, philosophy, even ethics was given to us. Commander Thalen Vera took a step back, his hands curling into fists. So all of it, the wars, the peace treaties, the alliances, it was all part of their plan. Doctor, Serenia Calith's eyes stayed fixed on the shifting images. Her heart pounded with the weight of the truth. The Oravans had been more than mere observers. They had been engineers of destiny. Scenes of war filled the holograms, battles that seemed brutal and senseless. But when the images zoomed out, a larger pattern appeared, conflicts that forced species to advance their weapons, to form coalitions, to develop diplomacy out of necessity. Every victory, every tragedy, was a carefully placed step toward something greater. Dr. Aravind Solon's voice was barely a whisper. Even our morality, look at this. She gestured to a glowing script that unfolded like a living scroll. They enhanced empathy, logic, and cooperation in different species in different ways. They designed entire cultures to complement one another. Kalen Drix nodded grimly. The Zarathi were given the foundations of analytical reasoning. The Valtharan were molded for engineering intuition. The Oravans' instinct for quantum sciences. It wasn't chance. They made us different so that one day we could become stronger together than we could ever be alone. Thalen's jaw tightened. So we've never truly been free. Every great discovery, every belief in our uniqueness, it all came from them. Serenia turned to him, her eyes calm but firm. No, we still made choices. They may have lit the path, but we walked it ourselves. They gave us tools, but they didn't force our hands. Perhaps freedom was never about being untouched. It was about how we used what we were given. Her words settled over the team like a fragile shield against despair. Yet deep inside, every one of them felt the same hollow fear. If the Oravans had done all this, why? What purpose could justify reshaping the fate of entire civilizations? The answer came in a chilling final image, a star map showing thousands of worlds. One by one they blinked out, replaced by ominous black voids. At the edge of the map, glowing letters appeared in the Oravan tongue. Kalen read them aloud in a hoarse voice. Subject civilizations on schedule. Final preparation required before arrival of the veil. A silence heavier than any before filled the room. The pattern was undeniable now. They had been crafted, every species, every culture, every history, to fight something coming from the dark between galaxies. Dr. Solon closed her eyes. Our entire past was never just history, it was training. And in that moment, the truth felt both empowering and terrifying. Everything they thought they knew about themselves was a lie, and yet, it was also the reason they had survived this long. Yet the greatest revelation was still to come, why the Oravans had done all this. The chamber dimmed as if responding to their unspoken questions. The crystalline spires pulsed in unison, projecting a vast image of a spiral galaxy in its prime, brilliant stars, glowing nebulae, and countless inhabited worlds. This was the home of the Oravans, an empire that had stretched across millions of light years, their power so great that nothing in their time could challenge them. The hologram shifted. Stars began to fade, one by one. Entire sectors of the galaxy turned black, not with the violence of explosions, but with an eerie stillness. Cities once alive with light and motion became frozen monuments, their inhabitants simply gone. Machines still operated, rivers still flowed, winds still blew, but every trace of life had vanished. A soft voice echoed from the hologram, translated by Prof. Kalen Drix. We called it the Veil of Stillness. It does not destroy, it erases. Every cell, every living thing, rendered inert. Worlds remain as perfect tombs, but life never returns. Commander Thalen Veira stared at the vision, his jaw tightening. So they weren't preparing us for power, he said quietly. They were preparing us for survival. The projection continued, showing desperate Oravan fleets firing colossal weapons that bent gravity and tore stars apart. They hurled everything they had at the darkness, but the veil advanced without pause, unstoppable and silent. Dr. Aravind Solon's voice trembled. They had weapons strong enough to shatter worlds, and it meant nothing. Kalen Drix scrolled through more of the Oravan records, his face pale. Their journals say the veil isn't a weapon or a plague, it's a force. Maybe alive, maybe not. It feeds on the quantum signature of biological life. The more advanced and unified a civilization becomes, the stronger that signal is, like a beacon calling to it. Serenia stepped closer to the hologram, her hand raised as if she could touch the cold light. Their empire was too uniform, she whispered, too centralized. One people, one way of thinking, one power. It made them predictable. It made them visible. The projection shifted again, showing the Oravans' final attempts to survive. They abandoned their great empire, scattering fragments of their population to distant galaxies. But the veil followed. Every sanctuary, every colony was eventually found. We learned too late. The Oravan message continued. Force cannot stop it. Survival requires something we never had: diversity, unpredictability, and unity without control. Thalen exhaled slowly, realization dawning on him. That's why they changed us. That's why we're all so different, different minds, cultures, strengths. They wanted to create a galaxy that the veil couldn't see. Serenia closed her eyes, letting the weight of it sink in. All the wars, the alliances, the differences that had once divided civilizations, it had all been part of a greater design. A design meant to create chaos that could not be predicted, yet cooperation that could not be broken. Doctor, Solon's voice was soft but steady. They sacrificed everything, an empire that lasted millions of years, to give us a chance they never had. The hologram dimmed to a single line of text. Kalen read it aloud, his voice heavy. The heir's ascendant must be ready. We failed so that you may succeed. No one spoke. The truth was too large, too raw. The Oravans had not been gods, only mortals who had seen too far and understood too late. They had tried to break a cosmic cycle of death, not for themselves, but for those who would come after. In that silent chamber, Serenia felt both humbled and terrified. Everything they were, everything they had ever become, was not an accident. It was a gift and a burden. For the first time, she understood. Their freedom would only truly exist when they chose what to do with that gift. But as this truth spread, the galaxy itself was thrown into turmoil. The revelation spread across the stars like a storm that no fleet could stop. Entire civilizations awoke to a truth they had never imagined. Their history, their triumphs, their very existence had been shaped by hands long turned to dust. At first, there was disbelief. Leaders in shining halls of power declared the findings to be lies, desperate to protect the myths that held their societies together. Priests and scholars argued fiercely, clinging to the stories that had defined their people for generations. But the evidence could not be denied. Vaults opened on distant worlds, each revealing the same symbols, the same records, the same history written by the Oravans. Monuments of forgotten ages rose from beneath deserts, oceans, and ice caps, each awakening as if the galaxy itself had been waiting for this moment. On Zerath Prime, massive displays lit up in the great cities, showing the pale, silver-eyed beings who had sculpted the galaxy's destiny. Crowds gathered in silence, staring at the holograms that shattered their sense of identity. Parents held their children close, whispering reassurances they did not truly believe. How could they tell their sons and daughters that the heroes of old, the inventors, the philosophers, the warriors, might never have been entirely their own? In the militaristic Syndral Dominion, the warlords gathered in their iron citadels. Their leader stood before them, his voice a thunderous roar. The Oravans left us weapons, shipyards, power beyond imagination. They shaped us to be strong. Then let us claim our destiny. Let us rise and rule as they once did. His words ignited the hearts of those who dreamed of conquest. To them, the Oravan legacy was not a burden but an opportunity, an inheritance of supremacy. Elsewhere, far from the Dominion's fervor, different conversations took place. On quiet worlds under starry skies, philosophers sat with students, debating not with anger but with humility. If our ancestors were given help, one teacher said, does that lessen what they achieved? Or does it mean they were part of something greater? These discussions became the true battlefield, one of ideas, not weapons. Was freedom the absence of influence, or was it the ability to choose a new path even after knowing the truth? Some argued that the Oravan's guidance had stolen their agency. Others believed that knowledge of their past gave them the chance to finally define their future. In the grand hall of the stellar Concordium, chaos reigned. Delegates shouted over one another, their voices echoing in the vast chamber. We must destroy the vaults, one cried. If we accept their gifts, we become slaves to the dead. A representative of the Valtharin Guild stood slowly, his voice calm but firm. Slaves, no, they cannot command us, they are gone. The question is not whether they shaped us. The question is what we will do now that we know. Even as debates raged, the vaults continued to awaken. Across dozens of homeworlds, colossal underground shipyards, planetary defense grids, and ancient AI systems began to hum with life. They did not wait for permission. They acted as if the time for hiding had ended. It was as though the Oravans had built not just machines, but choices, waiting for their inheritors to decide whether to claim or reject them. Dr. Serenia Caliph, whose team had first uncovered the truth, became a reluctant figurehead for those who sought unity. Messages poured in daily, pleas for guidance, offers of cooperation, threats from those who feared what she represented. She spent sleepless nights reading the Oravan records, searching for answers. In a quiet moment alone, she recorded her thoughts. Perhaps the Oravans understood something we never did. True freedom does not mean untouched beginnings. None of us begins unshaped. We are molded by parents, by teachers, by the world around us. What matters is the choice we make after we understand the forces that shaped us. The vaults are not chains, they are mirrors. And in those mirrors we must see who we truly are. Yet while many sought unity, darker whispers spread in the shadows. In back rooms and secret councils, powerful leaders spoke of seizing the Oravan technology for themselves. They imagined fleets unstoppable by any rival, empires reborn in their own image. The same ambition that had doomed the Oravans began to stir once more. The galaxy stood at a crossroads. It had been given the greatest gift and the heaviest burden, knowledge. The choice was no longer whether the Oravans had shaped them. That truth was undeniable. The choice was whether they would follow the same path that had destroyed their makers, or break the cycle and become something greater. Serenia watched the stars from her quarters aboard the Starlint's horizon. The vastness of space felt heavier now, not with fear but with responsibility. The Oravans had left them power, but power alone would not save them. In the end, survival would depend not on the weapons they could build, but on the kind of people they chose to become. In the heart of Orali's prime, the greatest of these creations stirred, ready to unite the galaxy. Far above the surface of Orali's prime, a colossal structure stirred for the first time in 500,000 years. The Nexus spire floated like a crown of light against the planet's pale sky, its rings of silver and crystal slowly rotating as if waking from a long dream. Streams of energy arced across its surface, flowing into geometric patterns that pulsed in rhythm, like the heartbeat of something vast and sentient. When the starlint's horizon approached, the spire's outer shell began to shift. Panels slid apart with graceful precision, revealing docking arms and bridges that unfolded as though they had always known the ship would come. It was not just a station, it was a living design, a structure that seemed to sense its purpose and its inheritors. Inside the Nexus spire, the air was clear and cool, carrying a faint hum that resonated through the bones of those who entered. The walls glowed with soft light, not harsh or artificial but warm, like the radiance of a star filtered through water. In the central chamber, vast holograms flickered to life, displaying thousands of worlds and ships scattered across the galaxy. Professor Kalen Drick stood in stunned silence, eyes wide as the Auravan language scrolled rapidly across a circular display. His translator struggled to keep pace, but piece by piece, meaning emerged. Unity protocols, comprehensive implementation sequence. They planned all of this, he whispered. The fleets, the alliances, even the way our languages evolved. It's instructions, not just for war, for how to live, how to work together without losing what makes us different. Doctor, Serenia Kalith stepped forward, watching as new holograms materialized around her, ships of every species she had ever studied. Valtheran engineering vessels with intricate lattice hulls, Auravan starcraft that shimmered as if phasing in and out of reality. Zarathi cruisers with elegant crystalline designs. Each ship glowed in its own color, its own form. And then before their eyes the ships connected, merging their systems through invisible streams of light. The hologram shifted, showing fleets moving as one, different vessels operating as if they were parts of a single body. This is what the Auravans meant, Serenia murmured. Unity without uniformity. We were never meant to become them. We were meant to become something greater. Commander Thalen Veira frowned, his hands resting on the edge of the display. Can we trust it? What if this program makes us into exactly what they wanted? What if we lose the very freedom we're trying to defend? Prof. Drix shook his head. Look closely. The protocols don't force obedience. They enhance cooperation. Every species keeps its own designs, its own tactics, its own culture. The strength comes from difference, not from control. Dr. Aravind Solon studied the data streams with quiet wonder. The Auravans understood that diversity creates unpredictability. They designed a way for us to be more than the sum of our parts, something they could never be. Suddenly, the hologram shifted again, displaying a simulation of a vast fleet in combat. The ships operated independently, each following its own strategy. Then the scene replayed, this time with the protocols active. The fleet's movements became fluid, almost instinctive. Attacks combined, defenses overlapped, and the entire formation fought like a living organism. The final result was clear, victory achieved with far fewer losses. Serenia felt a strange mixture of awe and unease. It was brilliant, beautiful, even, but it carried a lesson deeper than war. The Auravans knew that power alone couldn't save them, she said softly. They built a system that makes unity a choice, not an order. They gave us the ability to be stronger together, but only if we decide to trust one another. Outside the spire's massive windows, the first ships began to gather, fleets from distant worlds answering the call. Some came reluctantly, their leaders still filled with doubt and pride. Others came with hope, ready to embrace what the Auravans had left for them. As more vessels arrived, their differences became clear. Some were vast and angular, forged for brute force. Others were delicate, shaped like wings of glass, relying on speed and precision. They looked nothing alike, yet within the Nexus spire their systems linked effortlessly, as though the ships had been waiting for this moment all along. Commander Vera watched the hologram of the combined fleet. "If this works," he said quietly, "will be something the galaxy has never seen before." Serenia nodded, her eyes reflecting the glow of the Auravan symbols. "No," she said, "something the universe has never seen before, and for the first time, the choice will be ours." The hum of the Nexus spire deepened, resonating like a great bell tolling in the void. Across the galaxy, more vaults began to stir. The Unity protocols were spreading, awakening ancient systems that had slept for millennia. But as the spire came fully alive, one truth settled in the minds of everyone present. The tools alone would not save them. Survival would depend on whether the inheritors could rise above fear, ambition, and pride, and choose to stand as one. And so, the work began to create the first fleet the galaxy had ever truly shared. From orbit, the shipyards of Orales Prime looked like constellations of living metal. Hundreds of construction platforms floated in formation, their skeletal frames glowing with the fire of forges that had lain dormant for 500,000 years. Great scaffolds extended around the hulls of newly built vessels, some sleek and crystalline, others angular and powerful, each reflecting the culture that had birthed it. Dr. Serenia Calith stood on a viewing platform within the Nexus spire, her hands resting on the transparent railing as she watched the impossible take shape. The first Unity fleet was being born. Valtheran engineers guided enormous lattice-like frameworks into place, their precision unmatched. Auravan scientists operated phase drives that caused entire sections of starships to shimmer in and out of reality, aligning perfectly without error. The Zerathi added their crystalline reactors, which pulsed with light like the beating of a heart. Each vessel was a masterpiece of its species' philosophy. Yet slowly, piece by piece, the ships were linked together through invisible webs of Auravan technology. Their systems adapted, harmonizing without erasing what made each design unique. Commander Thalen Vera walked beside Serenia, his eyes tracing the chaotic beauty of the shipyards. "It feels wrong," he said quietly. "Seeing ships so different, yet working together like they were always meant to." Serenia glanced at him. "Maybe that's the point. The Auravans wanted us to be unpredictable even to ourselves. They didn't want to make a copy of their empire. They wanted something that could never be planned for." In another section of the spire, Professor Kalen Drick studied projections of the fleet's early simulations. The results astonished even him. Fleets that fought separately, each following its own doctrine, could achieve victories but at heavy cost. With the Unity protocols active, the same fleets became something entirely new. Attacks overlapped like strokes of a single brush. Defenses shifted in unison without any central command issuing orders. It was as though the ships shared instinct, a unity born not of control but of trust. Meanwhile, the debates in the stellar concordium grew ever fiercer. Many worlds sent ships willingly, inspired by the hope of survival. Others refused, fearful of surrendering their independence. The Syndral Dominion, obsessed with power, constructed its own fleets in secret, unwilling to accept a galaxy where authority was shared rather than seized. On the shipyards themselves, tensions simmered. Crews from rival species, once enemies in war, now worked side by side. Misunderstandings sparked arguments. Old grudges flared, yet more often than not, differences turned into solutions. One Valtharan engineer, frustrated by a Zarathi technician's unconventional methods, shouted in anger, only to realize the new approach solved a problem they had been struggling with for hours. Laughter followed, hesitant at first, then genuine. Day by day, the crews learned that their differences were not weaknesses. They were weapons the Veil could never predict. Dr. Aravind Solon stood at the edge of a massive hangar, watching a newly completed vessel detach from its construction platform. "It's strange," she said softly to Serenia, who had joined her. "We thought our diversity was what kept us apart, but it's what makes us stronger than the Oravans ever were." Serenia nodded, her voice low. "They gave us the ability to unite without losing ourselves. That was the one thing they never achieved. The first Unity fleet took form faster than anyone thought possible. Ships of every design moved into formation above Orali's prime, glowing faintly as their systems linked through the Oravan networks. To those watching from the planet's surface, the fleet looked less like a collection of vessels and more like a single living constellation, pulsing with shared purpose. Commander Veera stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the combined fleet on the view screen. "We've always fought for power, for survival, for pride," he said quietly to Serenia. "But this time, we're not fighting for any of that. We're fighting to exist, not as tools of the dead, but as something greater." The flagship's engines roared to life. One by one, the other vessels followed suit, their reactors flaring in brilliant colors. As they moved together for the first time, the fleet seemed to breathe, alive, united, and more powerful than the Oravans could have ever been on their own. In that moment, Serenia understood. The Oravans had given them weapons, yes, but the true gift was choice. What they did next would decide whether their galaxy would remain free or fall as the Oravans once had. Yet even as the fleet grew, a greater project began, one that could reshape the galaxy itself. The celestial resonance grid began as an idea too vast for most to imagine. A network of colossal installations spread across the entire galaxy, each one designed to create waves of energy that would interfere with the veil of stillness itself. It was not a single weapon, but a living system, part shield, part sword, meant to turn the galaxy into something the veil could neither see nor understand. On Orali's prime, the first node rose from the oceans like an awakening titan. Towers of silver and crystal emerged from the waves, water cascading down their sides as the structures locked into place with a hum that resonated deep in the bones of those who watched. Similar nodes appeared on other worlds, some lifting from deserts, others from beneath glaciers or hidden deep inside asteroid belts. Dr. Serenia Kalith watched from a high platform as the Nexus Spire coordinated the construction of the grid. The scale of it defied comprehension. Thousands of worlds were now connected, sharing resources, knowledge, and labor. But what astonished her most was not the technology, it was the people. Scientists from species that had once despised each other now worked side by side, arguing passionately, failing often, and yet finding solutions none could have discovered alone. Oravan physicists blended their mastery of quantum mechanics with Valtharan engineering expertise. Zarathi artisans applied their crystalline architecture to construct reactors unlike anything seen before. Professor Kalen Drix examined the Oravan records with growing awe. "They didn't just give us weapons," he murmured. "They designed our cultures themselves, our languages, our art, even our music, to be compatible in ways we never realized. Cooperation feels natural because it was always part of what we are. Dr. Aravind Solin nodded. Maybe they understood that technology alone would never be enough. They shaped our very instincts so that when this moment came, working together would feel right. As the grid's first test neared, tensions rose. Some leaders argued that the Oravan influence was too deep, that following their plan made them nothing more than puppets of the dead. Others countered that the Oravans had given them freedom, not chains, the power to choose whether to use the gift or reject it. In one assembly hall, a young delegate from the Oravan colonies stood and spoke with a clarity that silenced the room. Our history has always been guided by others, by parents, by mentors, by those who came before us. The Oravans may have shaped us, but they are gone. What we do now is our choice. That is what freedom truly means. The first activation of the grid was breathtaking. As the nodes came online, streams of light arced through space, connecting star systems across unimaginable distances. Energy rippled outward in patterns so complex that even the most advanced computers struggled to model them. Commander Thalen Vera watched the readings with disbelief. "It's working," he said softly. "The signal, it's not just hiding us, it's changing us. The galaxy feels different." Serenia stared at the display, realizing the deeper truth. The Oravans had not only created a defense, they had given their heirs a chance to become something entirely new, a civilization not defined by conquest or fear, but by the choice to stand together. As the grid pulsed with light, the ships of the Unity fleet flew among the activated nodes, their systems harmonizing effortlessly. For the first time, the galaxy looked not like a collection of rival powers, but like a single, living whole. Yet even in that moment of triumph, Serenia felt the weight of the past pressing down on her. The Oravans had once believed themselves invincible, unified under a single banner, and it had been their downfall. This time, things were different. There was no single empire, no single voice to command them. The galaxy remained many peoples, many cultures, many paths choosing for now to walk together. The grid's hum deepened, reverberating across the stars. For a brief moment, the veil would not see them. But everyone knew this victory was only the first step. The real test was yet to come. Whether they could remain united when fear and ambition returned, as they always did. But as the grid completed its first activation, the inheritors began to understand the Oravan's final wish. The galaxy changed in ways no one had expected. The celestial resonance grid was more than a weapon or a shield. It became a bridge. It linked distant worlds not just with energy, but with trust. Supplies moved freely across once hostile borders. Scientists and engineers from rival civilizations collaborated as if centuries of hatred had never existed. Children on far-flung planets grew up learning the languages and songs of species their ancestors had called enemies. Dr. Serenia Kalith stood within the Nexus Spire's observatory, gazing out at the glowing web of light stretching across the galaxy. It no longer looked like a scattered collection of civilizations. It looked alive, as if the galaxy itself had become a single organism. Professor Kalen Drix approached, his tablet filled with translated Oravan texts. "I think I finally understand," he said softly. "The Oravans didn't just want us to survive the veil, they wanted us to surpass them." Serenia turned to him. "Surpass them," Kalen nodded. "Their journals aren't just records of their power, They're filled with regret. They unified their empire, but at the cost of diversity, unpredictability, and growth. They became strong but predictable, and that made them easy prey for the Veil. Dr. Aravind Solin joined them, her expression thoughtful. They wanted us to become what they could never be, different from one another, yet able to stand together by choice. They didn't just design weapons, they designed a better way to live. On countless worlds, debates raged. Some people argued that accepting the Oravan's legacy meant giving up freedom. Others saw the grid and the Unity fleet as proof that freedom had never been lost. Choice still existed, perhaps for the first time in history. A philosopher on Zereth Prime spoke words that spread across the galaxy. We are not less because we were guided. The Oravans shaped us, yes, but they could not decide who we would become. Today we choose, and in that choice lies our freedom. Commander Thalen Vieira walked into the chamber, his usual sternness softened by quiet wonder. The Unity fleet is ready, but something's different. The crews, they aren't afraid. They want this. Not for power, not for conquest, but because they believe this fight belongs to all of us. Serenia looked back out at the glowing lattice of the grid, the ships moving in perfect harmony across the stars. They gave us technology, she said, but the real gift was hope and the ability to decide our own story. The Nexus spire pulsed with light as new signals flowed across the galaxy. The Oravan's final message echoed in their minds. We failed so that you may succeed. Do not become us, become more. Those words were not a command, they were a plea. And in that moment, Serenia understood. Survival was not enough. The true victory would be to live in a way the Oravans never could, to build a future chosen freely, not by design but by will. The fleets assembled, not as weapons of an empire but as a promise that when the Veil came they would meet it not as slaves of destiny but as free beings, heirs not of power but of choice. And so, with fleets and grid complete, the inheritors prepared to take their first step as something new. The first Unity fleet hung above Orali's prime like a living constellation, thousands of ships from dozens of civilizations aligned in perfect formation. Each vessel still bore the marks of its origin: Valtharan lattice hulls, Oravan phase-shifting drives, Zarathi crystalline cores, yet they pulsed as one, connected through the ancient networks of the Oravans. The fleet did not look uniform. It looked alive. From the observation deck of the Nexus spire, Dr. Serenia Kalith stood in silence. Her reflection shimmered faintly against the transparent glass as she watched the fleet preparing to depart. She thought of the records they had uncovered, the regrets of the Oravans, the warnings, the desperate plea for those who came after to be better than their makers. Beside her, Commander Thalen Vieira folded his arms, his gaze fixed on the ships. "It's strange," he said softly. "We've built something more powerful than anything the Oravans ever dreamed of. But this time, power isn't the goal." Serenia turned to look at him. "No," she agreed. "It's just a means. What matters is what we choose to do with it." Across the galaxy, nodes of the celestial resonance grid pulsed in harmony, their light spreading like veins of fire through the stars. Worlds once divided by war now shared resources freely. Former enemies fought side by side in training exercises, their differences no longer a weakness but a source of strength. Professor Kalen Drix entered the chamber, his expression unusually hopeful. "The simulations are complete," he said. "The Unity protocols, they've exceeded every projection. The more we cooperate while remaining different, the stronger we become. It's as if the galaxy itself rewards our diversity." Dr. Aravind Solon stepped in behind him, her voice calm but resolute. The Oravans couldn't see past themselves. They built an empire of order and strength, but it made them predictable. We aren't like them. We fight differently, we think differently, and that is why we might win. Commander Veera let out a slow breath. We've always fought for power, for land, for pride. But this time we fight because we've decided this galaxy is worth saving. Not for the Oravans, for us. Outside, the fleets began to move, their reactors flaring in brilliant colors as they formed up for their first true test. To the people watching from the surfaces of distant planets, it looked as though a new constellation had taken shape in the heavens, one that pulsed with purpose, not fate. Sarania placed her hand on the glass, her voice steady. We are not their tools anymore. We are not their experiment. We are their heirs, and we will decide what that means. The Oravans' final message echoed once more across every active vault and installation. We gave you what we never had. Not just strength, not just knowledge. We gave you choice. Become more than we were, become free. And as the Unity fleet departed, its thousands of ships gliding into the dark between stars, the galaxy took its first step into a future no one, not even the Oravans, could have predicted. The age of empires was over. The age of the heirs ascendant had begun.